Howdy everybody, it's Randy Ray here at the Literate Texan here at Driftwood Ranch, and this is number 8 in my series of bookshelf tours. They're pretty popular. People seem to like them. People seem to be enjoying them. Maybe it's because I have eclectic taste in books. I don't know. But this is the 8th shelf I'm going through, and I say this at the beginning of every one of these. I don't think it's going to be as long as the others. Then I always think of things to say about the various books on the shelves too. So anyway, I'm just going to start at random from this shelf, run through them, and tell you what the books are about. The first one, this one's real interesting to me. It's a book by Doug Peacock called Was It Worth It? A Wilderness Warrior's Long Trail Home. And here's the cover of it. Okay, and some of you may know that I'm a fan of Edward Abbey. He was an environmental writer. And he was part of the Earth Firster movement in the 60s. Let's read some of this stuff on the back here. In a collection of gripping stories of adventure, best-selling author Doug Peacock, loner, iconoclast, environmentalist, and contemporary of Edward Abbey, reflects on a life lived in the wild, reflecting on the question many ask in their twilight years, was it worth it? With adventures both close to home, grizzlies in Yellowstone, jaguars in the high Sonoran Desert, and farther afield, tigers in Siberia, spirit bears in British Columbia, the amazing birds of the Galapagos, Peacock acknowledges that COVID-19 has put everyone's mortality in the lens now, and it's not necessarily a telephoto shot. Peacock recounts these adventures to explain his perspective on nature, that wilderness is the only thing left worth saving. Both entertaining and thought-provoking, Was It Worth It? Challenges readers to make certain that the answer is yes. So I'm looking forward to digging into this. This was actually recommended to me by a former sociology professor of mine, and I bought him a copy of it while I was getting my copy too, because he was the one who turned me on to Edward Abbey in the first place. This next book, most of y'all probably think I just read novels too, but that obviously nonfiction, that's a work of memoir. This is called Blood in the Water, which won the Pulitzer Prize. The Attica Prison Uprising of 1971 and Its Legacy. And this is a book of popular history here. On September 9th, 1971, nearly 1,300 prisoners took over the Attica Correctional Facility in upstate New York to protest years of mistreatment. They took 38 hostages and over the next several days negotiated with officials for improved conditions in the prison. On September 13th, the state abruptly ended discussions and sent hundreds of heavily armed troopers and correction officers to retake the prison by force. Their gunfire killed 39 men, hostages as well as prisoners, and severely wounded more than 100 others. In the days that followed, troopers and officials and officers brutally retaliated against the prisoners. And in the aftermath, New York State authorities prosecuted only the prisoners, never once bringing charges against the officials involved in the violent retaking of the prison. Drawing from more than a decade of extensive research, historian Heather Ann Thompson illuminates every aspect of the uprising and its legacy, giving voice to all those who took part in this 45-year fight for justice. Blood in the Water is the searing and indelible account of one of the most important civil rights stories of the last century. I didn't know what Attica was until I watched a movie called Dog Day Afternoon, and they started talking about Attica in there, and so I looked it up, and I thought, man, that sounds interesting. I'm going to go find this book about it and read it too, and I did. And the next one's another popular work of history called The Great Influenza, the story of the deadliest pandemic in history by John M. Barry. Now, this is interesting because the deadliest pandemic in history that they're talking about here is not COVID. It's actually the Spanish flu from the winter of 1918 at the height of World War I. It was history's most lethal influenza virus erupting in an army camp in Kansas, and it moved east with American troops, then exploded, killing as many as 100 million people worldwide. It killed more people in 24 weeks than AIDS killed in 24 years, more in a year than the Black Death killed in a century. But this was not the Middle Ages, and 1918 marked the first collision between modern science and epidemic disease. Magisterial in its breadth of perspective and depth of research, The Great Influenza weaves together multiple narratives with characters ranging from William Welch, founder of Johns Hopkins Medical School, to John D. Rockefeller and Woodrow Wilson. Ultimately a tale of triumph amid tragedy, this crisis provides us with a precise and sobering model as we confront the epidemics looming on our own horizon. So it's pretty interesting. One of the things that I noticed when reading this book is that our responses to the influenza pandemic in 1918 weren't much different from our responses, from the COVID pandemic. People acted just about the same. Another history book here, The Ghosts of Belfast by Stuart Neville. I got this because my daughter's boyfriend is reading it. It was winner of the Los Angeles Times Book Prize for Best Crime Novels. It's not nonfiction. I haven't read this one yet. Northern Ireland's troubles may be over, but peace has not erased the crimes of the past. Jerry Fegan, a former paramilitary killer, is haunted by the ghosts of the 12 people he slaughtered. Every night, at the point of losing his mind, he drowns their screams in drink. But it's not enough. In order to appease the ghosts, Fegan is going to have to kill the men who gave him orders. From the greedy politicians to the corrupt security forces, the street thugs to the complacent bystanders who let it happen, all are called to account. This masterpiece of both Irish literature and of crime fiction, now a modern classic, is presented here with an introduction by Val McDermid, a discussion guide for book clubs, and a behind-the-book peek at Stuart Neville's creative process. Now, this looks really good, too. And Steve Donahue might be interested in this because, I know he likes to talk about Ireland. And I know he's a fan of crime. I'm not a fan of crime, but you know what I'm saying. This next one is called Deep Work, Rules for Focused Success in a Distracted World by Cal Newport. Okay, this was an okay book. I liked it. I did not like it as well as his book, Digital Minimalism. But basically, it is about how one of the most valuable skills in our economy is becoming increasingly rare. And if you master the skill, you'll achieve extraordinary results. Deep work is the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task. It's a skill that allows you to quickly master complicated information and produce better results in less time. Deep work will make you better at what you do and provide the sense of true fulfillment that comes from craftsmanship. In short, deep work is like a superpower in our increasingly competitive 21st century economy. And yet most people have lost the ability to go deep, spending their days instead in a frantic blur of email and social media, not even realizing that there's a better way. Like I say, this was an okay book. I liked it better than his most recent one, which was called Slow Productivity, but I didn't like it as well as I liked Digital Minimalism. Another book, this made all the best of lists last year, or quite a few of them, was The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride, which won the National Book Award. In 1972, when workers in Pottstown, Pennsylvania were digging the foundations for a new housing development, the last thing they expected to uncover was a human skeleton. Who the skeleton was and how it got buried there were just two of the long-held secrets that have been kept for decades by the residents of Chicken Hill, the dilapidated neighborhood where immigrant Jews and African Americans lived side by side, sharing ambitions and sorrows. Chicken Hill was where Moosh and Chona Ludlow lived when Chona ran the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, which served the neighborhood's quirky collection of blacks and European immigrants, helped by her husband Musha, a Romanian-born theater owner who integrated the town's first dance hall. When the state came looking for a deaf black child, claiming that the boy needed to be institutionalized, Chicken Hill's residents, roused by Chona's kindness and the courage of a local black worker named Nate Timlin, bonded together to keep the boy safe. As the novel unfolds, it becomes clear how much the people of Chicken Hill have to struggle to survive at the margins of white Christian America, and how damaging bigotry, hypocrisy, and deceit can be to a community. When the truth is revealed about the skeleton, the boy, and the part the town's establishment played in both, McBride shows that it is love and community, heaven and earth, that ultimately sustain us. Looks like a great novel. I'm looking forward to reading it. Probably a little deeper than some of the novels I've been reading lately. I've been doing some Star Trek for Book Trek lately. This is a political book that a friend of mine recommended to me. I haven't read it yet. It's called A Libertarian Walks into a Bear. That's not a typo. The Utopian Plot to Liberate an American Town and Some Bears. And if I understand this correctly, it's about a tiny American town that wants to practice radical self-government and overlooked one hairy detail. No one told the bears. Once upon a time, a group of libertarians got together and hatched the Freetown Project, a plan to take over an American town and completely eliminate its government. In 2004, they set their sights on Grafton, New Hampshire, a barely populated settlement with one paved road. When they descended on Grafton, public funding for pretty much everything shrank. The fire department, the library, the schoolhouse. State and federal laws became meek suggestions, scarcely heard in the town's thick wilderness. The anything-goes atmosphere soon caught the attention of Grafton's neighborhoods, the Bears. Freedom-loving citizens ignored hunting laws and regulations on food disposal. They built a tent city in an effort to get off the grid. The Bears smelled food and opportunity. A libertarian walks into a bear is the sometimes funny, sometimes frightening tale of what happens when a government disappears into the woods. Complete with gunplay, adventure, and backstabbing politicians, this is the ultimate story of a quintessential American experiment. To live free or die, perhaps from a bear. Looks really entertaining to me. I've got a collection of essays here from Christopher Hitchens. It's called Hitch 22, a memoir. You either know who Christopher Hitchens is or you don't, but you probably do. He's one of the most noticed and debated public intellectuals of our time. He spent decades on the public stage, but he has rarely written of the private dimensions of his life until now. Hitch 22 is the candid personal history of a complicated man. English-born and American by adoption, all atheist and partly Jewish, stalwartly bohemian, proudly flaunting drinking along with disputation as hobbies in Who's Who, and rigorously intellectual. Here he discusses his famously unbending convictions, tracing the thread of principles that connects his opposition to war in Vietnam and his support for intervention in Iraq. He comments on the roots of his ironic, witty, and tough-minded style, honed through stints as a foreign correspondent in some of the world's nastiest places, as a lecturer and a teacher, and as an esteemed literary critic. Readers will find that his opposites attract, as do his many sketches of friendship and ex-friendship with notables from Martin Amis to Noam Chomsky. Condemned to be able to see both sides of any argument, Christopher Hitchens has contradictions that contain their own multitudes. In a mode that is anything but shy, he tells of his complex and warm relationship with his late mother, whose Jewish heritage he discovered only after her suicide, his formative experiences as a socialist and activist, and the authors who shaped his intellect, from Evelyn Waugh and P.G. Wodehouse to Karl Marx and Richard Llewellyn, with no shortage of asides, involving persons as diverse as Ted Hughes, Jorge Boris, and Margaret Thatcher, whom he memorably described as sexy. He relates a transatlantic journey of artistry, productivity, and fierce convictions, a portrait of a personal life lived in a very public way. In this fashion, Hitch 22 throws into high relief the calamities, contradictions, and curiosities of being Hitch. So I'm looking forward to reading that. I found out about that book also from Steve Donahue's page. I think it came to him in a mail haul one night. I've also got this biography here of Dick Cheney. It's called Cheney, The Untold Story of America's Most Powerful and Controversial Vice President. Okay, so I'm not a Dick Cheney fan. Most of you can probably tell that I'm not a conservative. But I did watch this movie about Dick Cheney, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to read more about his side of the story? So I did some research into the sources for that movie, and this book was cited as one of the most important sources. So I thought I'd get it and read it. But I haven't brought myself to read it quite yet. Excuse me, a little bit of gas. So, Casino Royale by Ian Fleming, the first James Bond novel. I don't think much has to be said about that. It's a cool looking edition though. I've got a biography of Charlie Chaplin here. It's called Charlie Chaplin, A Brief Life by Peter Ackroyd. Chaplin's an interesting guy. It's going to be an interesting book. I've got Advise and Consent by Alan Drury, a novel of Washington politics. Okay, so I believe won the Pulitzer. I'm a big fan of the Pulitzer Prize these days. And, oh, these books are getting away from me over here. Okay, I've got Moby Dick. This is the Norton Critical Edition of Moby Dick, which is, you know, consistently one of those books that might be considered the great American novel. It's about a whale, adventure story. You know, not much to it besides that, is there? That's what I've heard anyway. I've got a book here called The Friendly Dickens by Nori Epstein, who also authored The Friendly Shakespeare. And there's one other, The Friendly Jane Dickens, no, not Friendly Jane Dickens, The Friendly Jane Austen, which was written by another author. I'm not exactly sure who. But anyway, it's a good-natured guide to the art and adventures of the man who invented Scrooge. So it's part biography, but it also talks about the various novels and stories that he wrote and how and why he was so important to society in Victorian England. Reading was a big deal then, not like it is today. a much bigger deal. I've got The Church of Baseball, The Making of Bull Durham, Home Runs, Bad Calls, Crazy Fights, Big Swings, and a Hit by Ron Shelton. Ron Shelton is the guy who actually wrote the screenplay to Bull Durham. And I believe he might have produced the movie too. At any rate, this is something that I'm going to be reading for Summer of Sport, and I'm excited about it because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. I also have this beautiful slipcovered edition of All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren. Probably, or maybe, the most collectible book in my collection. Anyway, it's a really nice edition. I read this the first time when I was 18 years old. It's a terrific novel. It was a terrific novel then. It's a terrific novel now. I'm really looking forward to reading it. It is a novel, but it is largely based on some true events in Louisiana politics, from what I understand. And I've got this beat-up reading copy of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby here. Everybody's got one of these, right? Beating the Wheel, Winning Strategies at Roulette by Russell T. Barnhart. I could say all kinds of stuff about winning strategies at roulette, but don't bet your money on roulette. Let's just say that. Play Blackjack Like the Pros by Kevin Blackwood. This is actually an excellent introduction to the game of blackjack and to the concepts behind counting cards and blackjack. So that one's actually well worth your time if you're interested in gambling. And then finally, I've got a Signet classic of Mark Twain, The Innocents Abroad. And I really did finish this bookshelf tour very quickly. That was less than 20 minutes. This is the fastest one ever. But I probably spent less time talking about each book than usual. So I will be back with more videos soon. And don't worry, this is not going to be a channel where I only do bookshelf tours, although I feel like I could continue to do bookshelf tours for weeks on end. But that won't be necessary, I don't think. But I was Randy Ray on The Literate Texan, and we were here at Driftwood Ranch doing a bookshelf tour. This was number 8 in my series of bookshelf tours, and I will be back soon with another video. Until then, stay hydrated and stay sexy, folks.